And we're back, guys. Welcome back to Sports Talkers McHemme. We talked about the NFC before we went to break. Now we're going to talk a little AFC football. And, of course, the AFC tonight, their first matchup in the playoffs, starts with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is back in black. The last probably 2 months, and I'll tell you, Mike, we talked about the Steelers earlier in the year, and I was pretty much just was giving them up for dead. Got off to a really slow start, and you even mentioned, hey, the Steelers aren't dead yet, and the Killer Bees in Pittsburgh have come back with Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Ben Roethlisberger to just tear it up the last 6-7 weeks, finish out 11-5, and won the AFC North. However, towards the end of their game last week, their title-clinching game against the Bengals, Bell gets hit, and honestly, it probably was a clean shot. He was hit on. There was nothing dirty about it. But Bell hyperextends his knee, and he is out this game. Does that change the complexion of this game? That Steeler offense, are they going to be able to go up against that always vaunted Ravens defense, Mike?
Well, Dave, this is the way I see that game. The Ravens are going to sell out against the run. Anyway, they're going to shut down your run game, and it's going to come down to Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Bryant, Heath Miller, and it's going to come down to the passing game anyway. So I don't see Bell being out as having being as much a factor to the detriment of the Steelers as it might otherwise be, because the Ravens are so good against the run anyway.
And Roethlisberger this year, under offensive coordinator Todd Haley, who has just revitalized his career after it kind of flamed out his coaching in Kansas City, he's really wouldn't surprise me if he gets interviewed for some coaching jobs during the offseason, because the Steelers' offense just looks like no Steeler offense they've had in years. Ben Roethlisberger throws for almost 5,000 yards, almost 40 touchdowns this year. To me, he's in the running for MVP, because if you take Roethlisberger away from that team, I think you're talking about 3-13 or 4-12. I think he makes that much of a difference. And to go from, having 3,000 yards a year to almost 5,000, it's got to be his best year. I really think they do go ahead and pull out a victory tonight against Baltimore, because I think, for one, Joe Flacco is just so inconsistent this year for the Ravens. I think, like you said, Antonio Brown is just a difference maker, and I think they at least get past this game. Now, next week, not so sure about next week, but I think they at least will get the victory tonight. Of course, we mentioned the Bengals earlier, playing the Steelers last week, ended up runners-up in the AFC North. Well, they're actually going to be taking on the Indianapolis Colts tomorrow at Indianapolis. I really think in that one, Mike, that Andrew Luck is just going to be too much for the Cincinnati secondary to handle, especially since they're really struggling right now against the pass.
Dave, we talked about this last week when we were watching the game, and it's almost like, yeah, you want to win your division, but do you want to play a division foe, a tough division foe like Baltimore at home, or is it possibly better to lose and go on the road to Indianapolis, to a place where they don't know you as well? I mean, you can look at my team, the Rams, and the struggles that they have had, which seems like forever, and for the foreseeable future. And they play the Seahawks strong, and they play the 49ers strong, and they play the Cardinals fairly strong. Division games are tough. And I think Cincinnati has a shot against Indianapolis. Indianapolis has not been playing well in December, but that doesn't mean anything, because we have a new season.
Well, and, you mentioned Cincinnati, too. Andy Dalton has made the playoffs, 3 out of his 4 years as quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. This is his time to step up. He has not won a playoff game. The Bengals actually have not won a playoff game since 1990. We're talking the Boomer Esiason era. We're talking Sam Weish, and we're not Cleveland. I mean, it's been over 20 years for a playoff win, and the Bengals, Andy Dalton, they played him a big contract. He's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. He's going to have to step up, and I do think they can make it a competitive game, but I just don't know at home against Indianapolis if they can pull that off, especially Indianapolis after the drubbing they gave them 42-17 when they played a few weeks back. But Indianapolis could come in overconfident.
And sometimes a team like the Bengals who got beaten so thoroughly, they remember that, and they come back and they're ready to make amends for such an embarrassment on the field. And I think this game is really sort of a toss-up, but there's something that tells me that Cincinnati's going to get their victory tomorrow, the first one, as you said, in over 20 years.
And I would hope they would get a win, because any franchise should not go, almost a quarter of a century without a playoff victory. We're talking about the Royals during the baseball playoffs, going from 85 to this year. 1990, they have had an inept period. You're talking David Klinger, you're talking, Mike Shula, the list goes on and on and on with all the players they brought in that have just been flops. And, I think the Bengals can make a run for it, but I am probably going to disagree with you on it, because I think Indianapolis is probably going to be a little bit too strong, but, that's why they play the game. You never know.
And when we look at it, I don't think we have ever really looked at the AFC over the last 10 to 15 years where we have said at the beginning of the playoffs, where the playoffs weren't going to run through a city in which the quarterback was named either Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, and it's the same thing this year. It's going to happen again. We got, New England home field advantage throughout the playoffs. It's going to be a tough place to go through. They got the same factor as Green Bay with the weather. Denver as well. They can play in cold weather. Some of these other teams, Cincinnati could play in the weather. Pittsburgh can play in the weather. So we do have some more cold weather teams. But it's going to be interesting, because there's no way to figure out, to me, both of these AFC games this weekend are virtual toss-ups. And
they're both going to be very good games. When the Steelers and Ravens play each other, it's never a blowout. It's always going to go, to that very last possession. But Mike, our producer, is saying we got to go to another break. Of course, this show is sponsored by Rip It Energy Drinks. Thank you, Rip It. We'll be back in just a minute to actually talk some Arkansas Razorback basketball. Boston.